Hi everybody, happy Sunday. I hope you've had an amazing week. Today for this episode of Sunday School, we are going to be talking about this question here, how to properly apply bleeding inks. Now, bleeding inks and alcohol inks in general are something that are very common in the industry. They've been around for a very long time, but I feel like depending on the brands that you use and the specific way that they formulated these products, that a lot of them can have some kind of different application techniques and maybe some sealing techniques as well. So I'm going to talk to you about the Kokoist collections that we have in the line today, and we're going to go over a couple tips and tricks on how to apply them really beautifully. Let's get started. So some of you may be asking, what is a bleeding ink? So this is one of the original colors from the original Kokoist bleeding ink collection. This is the blue one. And basically this is a tinted alcohol ink. So there's a blue ink in here and it is in an alcohol solution. So when you apply it, it kind of evaporates as you apply it on the nail and just leaves pigment, which is really fun. It's a cool way of getting some very smoky texture. So it really looks very super watery in the bottle, but don't be surprised, don't be fooled. You do not need very much of this product. This little bottle goes a really, really long way, and there's a couple really fun ways to apply it as well. And just to show you before we move on, so this is the original collection of the Kokoist bleeding inks. We've got 7 different colors and a black and a white as well. So this was kind of like the OG that came out a few years ago. The second collection we released was actually this metallic series, which is really fun. It gives you really cool metallic shimmer as you spread the ink out over the nail. It gives very cool texture and shimmer and shine, which is really fun for a lot of different marble techniques as well. And then my personal favorite bleeding ink release was the Smoky series. These came out just last winter, just a couple months ago. And they are just the most beautiful, deep smoky colors. The Smoky Indigo and the Smoky Whiskey are definitely 2 of my favorites. And the way they blend is just super dreamy, absolutely lovely. Now this is actually a really great example video showing you guys the kind of texture and how the alcohol inks really apply. This is the Smoky series, and they applied them onto a piece of paper, and you can see how they evaporate. You can see that liquid really quickly disappear on the paper and just leave that kind of colorful ink left on the paper. So this is how they operate. You shake it up so that all the pigment is inside all the alcohol, but then when you apply it, the alcohol will evaporate and it will leave just the pigment, leaving for you to manipulate as you will. Okay, another great swatch video, but this time it's going to show you how to actually apply this onto the nail. So this is going to be starting with the Smoky Indigo. We're applying it onto a white that hasn't been wiped. There's no matte top coat whatsoever. It's just being applied straight to the nail very minimally. And then they're taking their pointed brush with some isopropyl alcohol and just blending out the edges to give you this really smoky kind of marbleized effect. You can add as much or as little alcohol as you want and then just let it evaporate and it's done. No curing required. It's a really, really beautiful, super easy product, especially when you're layering different techniques, when you're doing Japanese nuance marble techniques, things like that. This is a really, really handy tool to have. So here's another great example, this time using the metallic brown and the metallic gold from that metallic series I was talking about, applying it straight down onto the nail, and you can see that they spread, but they kind of evaporate and then they stop moving because all the alcohol is gone. It's just left the pigment. Then they're going with their pointed brush with more alcohol on it, reactivating that pigment and having it move around and kind of blend and get nice and cloudy wherever they're looking to have it. It's really great to let it dry and then manipulate it so you have a lot of control, and then you get some beautiful looks out of it. And an honorable mention here to @GlossPond on Instagram. They tagged us in this really, really cool look they did using the Nail Thoughts tortoiseshell color and I believe the brown bleeding ink to create this kind of spotted tortoiseshell look. And you can do that, those spots, just by using a teensy bit and just kind of dropping it down to get these little pools. And it created this really, really awesome kind of spotty tortoiseshell. I was a huge fan of this look when I saw it. Really, really pretty, very unique, and a really great use of the alcohol inks. Another really cool trick that I've seen with these alcohol inks is actually to dispense them into something like a dappen dish, a very shallow dish or any kind of small palette that you've got, taking your alcohol ink and just placing a little bit inside that dish and then just allowing that alcohol to evaporate inside the dish. So what's going to happen there is with no alcohol, all you're going to be left with is the ink inside this dish. Then all you have to do, you can take something like our Kokoist pointed brush, this guy here, add a little bit of alcohol to it, and then you can reach in there and just grab that pigment, and you can be a lot more controlled as to where you're applying that pigment and get a very small, very dainty watercolor effect. Super cool, and a little bit more, like it said, control. So you can play with it a little bit more effectively and a little bit more in a pinpointed area. So this product, as I mentioned, is an alcohol-based ink product. There is no gel in this whatsoever, so it does not need to cure. All you have to do when you apply this is make sure that any kind of wet areas are fully evaporated and fully dried before you go ahead and seal it with your top coat or any further coats that you're going to put on top. We have also gotten questions in the past asking if we should be applying this over a matte top coat. Now, if you apply it over a matte top coat, because that matte is more porous and it's got a little bit more grip, I have found that applying it over a matte top coat, you get less movement. So you get a little bit more color concentration, and it doesn't really smoke out in the same way as if you were applying it over an inhibition layer or over a kind of glossy, slippery layer. That's going to allow the product to move out a little bit better. That being said, putting it over a matte top coat, if that's the effect that you're going for and you don't want your ink to move very much, far be it from me to stop you. And in terms of sealing in this kind of product, I've really never had any issues simply sealing it with a top coat. It's always been just fine because it's just a little bit of ink and it's very, very sparse the way that we're blending it out and smoking it out. You should not have any kind of issues with lifting or chipping or things like that. Things that you might see when you're using something like a chrome or a foil. Because this is such a small amount of ink, you're gonna be just fine. If you are concerned that you've maybe used a lot of ink and you want to make sure that it's going to really seal in and it's not going to move anywhere, applying a little bit of a base and curing that before applying your top coat, it never hurts. It's always kind of a good insurance layer, but personally in my experience, I've never seen that to be an issue. So there you have it, a little bit more insight into the bleeding inks, how they operate, why they operate, what they do, how they do, all that fun stuff. As always, if you guys have any questions whatsoever on the bleeding inks, we have our cute little question box right up here. Feel free to drop your questions in there and I'll do my best to get back to you by the end of the day. Other than that, I hope you have an amazing rest of your Sunday. Enjoy your work week and we will see you next week for another episode of Sunday School. Take care.